It's all yours.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. So today we're going to be talking about reducing the cost of landscape maintenance, and it's going to be kind of on both sides of it. It's going to be reacting to whether or not your customer needs to reduce their cost of the maintenance of their property, and also how to kind of reduce the cost of labor in maintaining those properties. You know, both are important for many reasons. And, you know, as the general manager of a tree preservation company for a lot of years, you know, I've got a little bit of experience kind of going with those ups and downs along with my customers and our staff as well. So that being said, there's a lot of questions to ask when you have to reduce your budget. You know, preventative or therapeutic is a big topic that everybody gets into, and you know that knee-jerk reaction when you have to reduce your budget is usually you would cut that preventative stuff because you'd say, well, there's not a problem now, so you know, I'll worry about what's currently going wrong, and that would be the therapeutic side of it. But in reality, that preventative care is often a lot more less expensive than therapeutic. So, you know, putting in those lower dollar projects helps from those big expensive issues coming up. You know, like emerald ash borer is something that you really can't prevent. If you have an ash, you have to treat that tree. There's not really a cultural practice to avoid that. But something like a two-line chestnut borer, which is in the same family but native, it tends to go after stressed trees. It goes after stressed oaks, beeches, and things like that. So, you know, rather than having to, you know, inject that tree with triage, you know, you might be able to just mulch around it, fertilize it, just keep the tree happier. And that's going to be a lot less expensive than the chemical treatments of what happens if that tree does get stressed out. So sometimes the preventative, that's actually the care you want to do more of, and kind of get that therapeutic treatment and then get towards the preventative side of things. Aesthetic issues or more serious, you know, sometimes you want to say like, you know, apple scab on a lot of crab apples we see, we figure, you know, if it's a late season defoliation, we look at it as that's an aesthetic issue. So maybe we might want to cut that out of the budget, the treatment of that plant. But we also have to consider what the customer's goals are in that. So sometimes the aesthetic treatment might be the more important treatment. If we have, you know, say the homeowners planted that crabapple on Arbor Day with their family, you know, that's going to be their number one priority. So that's, you know, with a conversation with the customers, we get to know their goals and their, you know, what they're looking for in their landscape and what they really appreciate. Because sometimes what we consider a specimen tree might be something they don't even know what it is or why it's special. So, you know, that's where what our goals are comes into the conversation. Because as the arborists and the specialists and the landscape managers of these properties, you know, our opinion, you know, we should share freely with the customers, because that's really what they're paying us for, not only for us to keep them healthy, but tell them what's special about those trees, and, you know, kind of be more like when we go to the doctor, you know, they tell us what we should be doing, and we take their advice because they're the professional. And when we go on people's properties, again, we're the professionals, so we should be giving them a lot of advice on what's important and what's not as well. And then together come up with a, you know, that plan going forward based on whatever their budget may be. And also anything we can do to kind of make plans more efficient is what helps us on this side of the cost spectrum. You know, we tend to have a lot of treatments that are front loaded in the spring. A lot of fungicide applications tend to be done in the spring. That's when, you know, a lot of caterpillars are emerging, you know, the tree defoliating pests. So anything we can do to try to get existing customers' work from the spring spread out throughout the year, you know, makes us a little more efficient. You know, say those caterpillar problems, we already know that's going to be an issue, like when gypsy moth was a big problem in New England for a few years. You know, we could have treated those trees the fall before with triage and had control that spring. So then we'd have more time to get new customers because we're not busy taking care of everything that we already have on our plate. Same idea with the fungicides on crab apples, which we'll talk about more later. Sometimes with a plant growth regulator, we can get a thicker leaf cuticle and a hardier tree that's more capable of just defending itself. So we don't have to worry about maybe 3 fungicide sprays every spring. If we can use a plant growth regulator on it, you know, we might be able to avoid that. And then again, open up that time in the spring for other reactionary problems that tend to load up that time of year. So again, in this preventative or therapeutic conversation, we tend to see this is the spiral of issues that happen to a tree. The therapeutic would basically be treating something on the outside of the spiral to the middle of it, and the therapeutic is the inside of the spiral. So on the outside, we have are what are called the inciting factors. This is what stresses a tree out and makes it predisposed to a pest. That could be soil compaction, which is something we can work with. Air pollution is not something we can really change, but maybe select a more tolerant species in a planting. Climate change, we can actually do something about that through controlling problems with drought, which is also in that inner circle, because that's something that we see a little more now is we may get the same average amount of rain in a month, but it tends to be in more, extreme events. We might get 3 inches of rain on a thunderstorm event on the weekend and then have 2 weeks of no rain. So that's still considered a drought, even though we had our average rain. And these outside areas are where it's usually less expensive to intervene than those inner areas. Those wood and bark boring insects, armillary root rot, that can lead to just removing the tree, which is, complete loss and very expensive. Where working with the poor fertility of the soil, decompacting the soil, getting the excessive salts out, those are the things we can do pretty inexpensively to avoid those expensive inputs that often would exhaust our customers' budget over time. They may have a lot of money up front for what they think might be a one-time issue, but they might not be able to treat for that issue every time it comes back. So we need to get them out of that expensive inner part of that death spiral and work on those outer edges. And also, it turns out that, the other benefit of it is it's a lot more acceptable to the general public. The therapeutic care is considered a lot less input of the pesticides and what everybody tries to avoid, those hot topic words. So it's more sustainable in that practice, that people like doing those kinds of things in the fact they're avoiding the need to use pesticides. They're more likely to keep up with it, which helps us going, and they'll tell their friends about it more when they're impressed with how we maintain properties. So kind of explaining to people why we do things, how those minimal inputs shouldn't be dropped out, that those preventative treatments shouldn't be cut when they try to reduce a budget. Those might save $1 this year, but it's going to cost you 10 next year kind of thing. So soil compaction is probably one of the most common things in the urban area that predisposes a tree to be, having a pest issue. So we have to consider many factors in soil compaction. Why is the soil compacted? In this tree here, you can see it's probably from pretty heavy foot traffic. It's right near a tent. So, that's kind of a human input to that compaction. So that kind of changes what can be done to fix it. We can air spade, which is a very fast way to decompact soil. But, in this situation with heavy foot traffic, if we don't do something else on top of that, it's pointless. It'll just recompact in no time. Mulch is a great way to decompact soil naturally. That biodegradation, as that biological material decomposes, it naturally aerates the soil. It gets, worms moving up and down. And it takes a little bit longer, but if you see soils compacted, but the tree doesn't look too stressed yet, that's a great time to go with something like the mulch aspect, because that's going to be a lot less expensive and labor intensive to decompact the soil. It's also going to solve that foot traffic problem a little bit. So that's almost more of a permanent solution that's also less expensive. If that tree is in decline, maybe you have to combine the two, air spade and mulch, to really get that soil composition kind of to a more healthy standard. When you have compacted soil, you lose porosity. You can't hold moisture. The cation exchange capacity goes down. It just gets a lot harder for that tree to survive. So with air spading, the pros are it's fast results. You can, like I said, when you loosen that soil up, it's loosened immediately, and it's pretty easy to amend it. If you want to work in, biochar or organic matter to a clay or a sandy soil, that's a good time to do it, because it's about the same amount of labor as you're amending it. And customers can see that the work was done, which is always a pro. If something's going to be expensive, people want to see something for it. So, that's a great aspect of it. And personally, I think it's fun. I think it's a blast. I used to love air spading and did quite a bit of it. Trees really do respond well to it. It was just, we had to usually not just air spade, but usually came in with mulch. And it was a whole integrated management process with that tree. It was a multi-step go. The cons are is the equipment's very expensive. You also often have to rent the compressor, which is, usually, a couple $100 a day, which isn't that bad. But the other problem with that equipment is we like to do air spading in the fall or the spring when the tree's dormant. And that's also where we're in competition with other landscapers, because that's when they're renting their machines to blow out all the irrigation lines. So sometimes it's the most, concentrated part of the year for that equipment to be needed by a lot of industries. And, that's what makes it pretty expensive. You need skilled labor, which is, that's you got to have somebody that knows what they're doing. A good certified arborist is a great person to have out doing air spading, just because it can be complicated. You have to know what you're looking for. You have to know what you're looking at. If you're going for girdling roots, you have to know, what's an acceptable amount of roots to cut versus what's not, how to make a call there. And like I said, it could be temporary. If all you do is air spade, and, it depends on why that soil was compacted, whether or not that's going to be beneficial. If it's from a one-time construction project, loosening that soil back up, if it's high quality, maybe air spading is all you needed to do there. But if it's for, foot traffic or, even pet traffic, lawnmowers, things like that, heavy lawn care equipment, those are just temporary fixes if you don't do something else. So mulching, this is, as we said earlier, a great way to decompact soil. And it's low cost. It's a lot less expensive to put mulch down over a root zone than, go through the whole thing with an air spade, try to amend the soil and work with it that way. When you have the time, this is the way to go. It's low labor cost, low material cost, fast install. It does permanent changes, and that skilled labor can be a little bit lower for installing mulch. It's easier to explain how to do that. A lot of people know how to mulch properly. Keep it away from the trunks to the trees, 2 to 4 inches over the root zone. That's a great way to go. And also, some people might not want to give up the lawn area, but it'll reduce their maintenance there. And by building those mulch areas, we can plant a more diverse landscape, which in its own provides so many more benefits than, some of the chemical controls we can even do. If you have a biologically diverse landscape through just having plants that flower all the time, you're going to attract more beneficial insects, because in the different life stages of beneficial insects, they feed on different things. So the green lacewing, for instance, as a larvae, they feed on, aphids and all sorts of other issues. But as an adult, they like pollen and nectar. So, they can't sustain their own population if you don't have a nice diverse landscape. So that attracts them in, and that's another benefit of that mulch bed is you can then change it. It'll keep foot traffic off, keeps the soil temperatures lower, and keeps the moisture content up. And all these things are lower cost ways than always having to react to those inner problems, that therapeutic treatment that's a little more expensive. So kind of designing these landscapes a little smarter and allowing them to take care of themselves in the long run is the cheaper option. Like I said, though, the cons to the mulch beds are you got to convince the customer it's the right thing to do. And sometimes it's hard. So sometimes maybe you only get 5 or 6 feet around a tree. You don't get as much as you want, but get as much as you can. Even a large tree, say a 20-inch diameter oak, if you can get 6-7 feet of mulch around the base of that tree, just a smaller bed, that's going to have amazing effects over time. And another con, the mulch, if you don't use an air spade, it'll take a couple seasons for that soil to really decompact, but you'll see it makes an amazing difference over the years. But there are options we have that can speed up the benefits of mulch. So there's microbes that break down these organic materials. Mycorrhizae is a fungi that's very beneficial to trees, but they need food. And that usually comes in the form of carbohydrates. Their symbiotic relationship with trees is that they get those carbohydrates from the tree, and the tree gets the nutrients through the mycorrhizae. So if we want to have more beneficial mycorrhizae in the soil, there's that aspect of some people add mycorrhizae. They just keep putting down more mycorrhizae. But what we need to do is feed the mycorrhizae. We need to make it a more, an easier place for them to survive. So by adding carbohydrates to the soil, that population will naturally double, triple, quadruple. I mean, the population will just blow up. So just putting mycorrhizae into the soil doesn't fix the problem. There's not any more food there. So we have to add those carbohydrates. Other things we can do is, increase the cation exchange capacity by using things like humic acids, which is going to increase water and nutrient holding capacity. So I like to think of humic acids as the temporary organic matter. If you have low organic matter, there's not a lot of water retention in the soil, and there's a low exchange capacity of nutrients, where humic acid allows the soil to retain more moisture and increases that ability for nutrients to exchange until that mulch breaks down and has that organic matter that can do it naturally. So it's kind of like the fake natural environment until the real one takes over. So we can mulch and speed up those benefits by using things like the carbohydrates and humic acids to fake the natural environment until it's really there. So the products that we can use for that is Arborplex is a general tree fertilizer. It's a 14-4-5, and it's a mostly slow release nitrogen, so that's going to have extended feeding, but it's a liquid, so it doesn't need mechanical agitation. It's easily mixed in the tank, and that's where when we use this fertilizer, we can use additives like this. This is our carbohydrate. This is BioMP. It's a molasses-based additive and soil conditioner. And when we add this to a regular fertility program, this is the food source for those microbes. So when we put that mulch down, we can then feed the trees with the molasses and the traditional fertilizer that everybody's used to, but get all those benefits of increasing the microbial activity, which is going to really improve that plant vigor. And there's just a lot of places we can use this. Anywhere there's nutrient retention problems, heavy soils, low water holding capacity, combining these products is what really boost that activity and get you those benefits a lot faster that nature provides over long periods of time. Trees do prefer to be in the forest. It's where they evolved to be. And there they have a nice, long, natural process of material biodegrading. The microbes are all interwoven between each other. And then we took those trees out and put them in the middle of our yard, and they need a little extra love to make sure they can stay happy. And these are the ways we can do that. We can make it as close to their natural environment that they like and keep them happier, healthier, and this way they can defend themselves. And again, that's why this is going to be lower input. You can do this work almost any time of year. So you can spread that out through, summer, fall, all those are great times to get, mulch down, late spring. So you have a lot more ability to take your labor force that's usually really busy in the spring and then start taking that work and spreading it out through the year. And that's going to help lower our budgets. This product, Enviroplex, this is just a humic acid additive. So this is where, if you're doing your traditional feed, but you have those sandy soils or those clay soils, that's where this is going to be really beneficial. That low organic matter, this is going to make the tree react as if there was a proper amount of organic matter. So again, these are all additives we can just add right in the tank mix, no mechanical agitation, all great things. NutriRoot, this one is a fertilizer, it's a 2-2-3, but this is has a lot of those products kind of all in one. It's a great establishment product. It's a great use for when you have drought conditions to take stress off. Drought is a huge reason that trees get stressed and then have secondary pests come in, like trunk boring insects, things like that. So this has a seaweed extract in it also, which has cytokinins, which promotes root growth. And the more roots a tree has, the more water they can retain, the more nutrients they're available to them. And then it has humectants. And what that is an additive that actually attracts and condenses humidity in the soil profile and makes it available to the tree. So, as that, the hot days of the summer try to, evaporate that water out of the soil, it's going to take that water vapor as it tries to escape, recondense it, and make it available again. So you're going to, it makes about, it's going to make it so the tree needs about 50% less water than it normally would if it wasn't having that humectant treatment. So this is kind of a good all-in-one product. Again, great for establishment, transplanting. Those are the times I really like to use this. Planting trees is the most common problem is they don't get watered properly, they don't establish properly, and then we have to replace them within a year because they die. So, very cheap insurance policy on your end to install a tree, put this down and have a little more added trust that, things will go well. And here we just have, an easy chart to follow for these soil additives. based on, using that Arborplex fertilizer and then adding the molasses, humic acids, iron. Cytogrow is the seaweed extract that's in the NutriRoot. So you can kind of take and play with just what you need to actually tailor the program to the site. There's no one size fits all in fertility programs. So this is a good one where you can actually work, directly with those site conditions. And you can see there's, amazing results from 1 month to the next once they, get that humic acid in there, nutrients become available, and they get the proper moisture. So another way to build a tree's defense system is with plant growth regulators. So Shortstop 2SC is our plant growth regulator, which we use quite frequently. And it's a soil applied PGR. Paclobutrazole is the active ingredient. And it also helps alleviate drought stress. It enhances root growth. And we'll talk about how it does that as we go through this. So it is a suspended concentrate. So it's a clay-based carrier. You just mix it. For a soil drench, it's usually, or always, 1 part Shortstop, 11 parts water. And then depending on what kind of tree it is, you would measure the diameter and apply the proper amount of rate. But here's how it works. Paclobutrazole from the soil moves up throughout the tree, and it gets into the buds. It gets right into that apical meristem. And it kind of hangs out there until the next season when that cell elongation would occur. And it lowers the gibberellic acid, which reduces that cell elongation. So those main changes are going to be is reducing that acid, and then the gibberellic acid will be reduced, but it's going to increase abscisic acid. And that abscisic acid is what triggers trees to make their own defense compounds. So that's what drives that up. That causes more root growth when those goes up. Thicker leaves, which is how it protects the trees from that drought stress. Those thicker leaves transpire less. When the stomata close with that thicker leaf tissue, it's locked down much tighter than without being treated. The chlorophyll is much more efficient, so you'll get a darker, greener leaf that requires less input to output of energy. And those fibrous roots are going to, really take off. And again, that helps with the drought, general stress. The thicker leaves also make it harder for fungal spores to attach and attack the tree. So again, all that just making a happier tree that can better defend itself. This product lasts 3 years on one application here in the Northeast. So you can avoid a lot of applications, with one application of the paclobutrazole with the Shortstop product. So the tree energy theory is there's a lot of energy that goes into shoot growth, reproduction, root growth, and then defense and storage is last. Because naturally trees want shoot growth. They need to conquer the sky. They need to get the sun before the other plants do. That's just an evolutionary trait where that's how they succeed. And then reproduction, if they don't make it, there has to be another one to start right behind it. And when we use trees in an aesthetic manner or landscape manner, they already have generally as much sun as they'll ever need. They're generally in the front yard. We have our mature trees with underplantings. So if we can slow down that outward growth and take that natural response to grow as fast as possible away from trees, they can use their energy in better ways. Take down the shoot growth, the reproductive structures will go up, root growth goes up, defense compounds go up quite a bit, and storage. So having that increased storage of energy in the tree itself is how they can defend themselves against defoliating incidences. If a tree gets completely defoliated, it takes a lot of energy to refoliate. And as that happens, they exhaust those stores. And that's when you'll get into the spiral, and eventually they can just collapse and die. By increasing those stores, you'll have much better responses if those events do take place. And defense compounds, again, those are the phenols, which naturally, can have insecticidal properties on their own in many cases. When pine trees are happier and healthier, they can produce more pitch. So if a bark borer gets in, they have enough pitch to flush that out. When they're stressed out, they can easily be overtaken by boring insects. So here's just some pictures of the results there. So here you can see the shoot growth from untreated to treated. On oak trees, it's going to be about a 50–60% reduction in growth year over year. But often, like I said, we don't need that much growth on these trees once they're mature. We just need them to be as healthy as possible. Maple trees, you can see on a red maple, really gets those buds a lot tighter together, because the previous year that stem just didn't elongate as much as it normally would have. So you get the same amount of leaves, you get the same amount of flowers, they're just on a smaller area. So with this, we can reduce pruning costs if that's the target. That's one good way to reduce a budget. If you've got a crab apple that you have to prune every year and your customer's tired of paying that couple $100 maybe, reducing that growth, you can extend that pruning and maybe prune it once every 2 or 3 years rather than every year. So we have a low cost application of a growth regulator, which is going to avoid the high cost of pruning every year. So your budget goes further. So you can see here's similar years, similar rain patterns, treated versus untreated. You can see that you get that outer burn on the leaves when they go into drought stress. Here we have Cytospora canker on blue spruce. It's very effective at helping mitigate the effects on that. That's a common issue here. We see this diet, but we see a lot of needle cast issues on spruce as well, which is brought on by drought stress exacerbates that issue. But that and Cytospora canker, getting the benefits of a healthier tree, we see a lot less incidence of those issues. You can see with the paclobutrazol, we had several years of reduced severity in that Cytospora. Anthracnose and sycamores. A lot of times this is another one where a lot of people consider it an aesthetic issue, but if it really adds up year over year, you can get these trunk lesions, not trunk lesions, these stem lesions, and you'll start to get kind of witch's broom on the end of all the branches. It's aesthetically unpleasing, but that is harmful to the tree over many years. So for this treatment, commonly people would go out and do 3 sprays in the spring, but we found amazing results just using Shortstop on this year over year. So here you can see before you get that leaf tissue starts to brown, the trees will defoliate or leaf out really late in general. When they're treated, you have that thicker, waxier leaf, and over that several years, that you interrupt that cycle of the fungus going back and forth between the stem and the leaf, the stem and the leaf. You get in the way that you disrupt it, you get rid of the problem with a less intervention. So that's another great way to, over the 3 years, instead of spraying it 9 times, you treated it once. So you can do this in the spring or early summer. This application, but you just have to remember that since it's getting into the bud, it's generally not going to affect the tree until the following year. If you do it in the spring, those buds were already set the previous year with what they have there. So it's going to draw that product up as that expands, but it's going to be next year's buds that get control on it. So it does have a little bit of a lag in its benefits, but if you put this down in the summer or fall, you'll have decent benefits the next year. So you want to inject this or about 4 to 6 inches deep if you're using a probe, or you can just dig a moat around the base of the tree and apply it that way. You want to do that evenly and use the label to figure out what tree you have and what rate you have. Trees grow differently and they respond differently to the product. So using different amounts is important. So the chart is very inclusive to species. You can see there's quite a few on there. All the way from, red buds are very sensitive to it. So 50 mils of solution per inch is what you would use for those. All the way up to more aggressively growing trees like, tulip trees, the tulip poplars, redwoods, spruces, those things grow very fast. So it's a high rate, but it's easy to calculate your cost on this, being that it costs about 1 cent per milliliter of solution. That 200 milliliter rate is going to cost you $2 per inch in diameter, where that 50 mil rate is 50 cents per inch in diameter. And then from there you can go. So, a 20-inch tree at the 100 mil rate is going to cost, $20 in product, and you're going to get 3 years of benefits from it in fungicidal activity. I mean, that's a great cost saver right there. Reduce the labor, reduce costs in product, and, great efficacy on the issues. So last thing, basically just, to really remember, it's about efficiency on our end. And it's balancing that workload throughout the season, getting that spring work to spread out so we can bring on new customers, getting ahead of the issues, sticking with those preventative treatments, doing the therapeutic work, but then getting them out of that spiral, get rid of that inciting factor that caused that issue. Extend our treatment windows and, and that's how we can work with our customers to reduce their budget and also, reduce our cost as well to get the work done. One last thing I like to remember always is trees do have a value. So when customers want to remove a tree or give up on a tree that could die, reminding them that in their property value is increased stormwater. Stormwater is mitigated from its effects of, just erosion of the soils. I know people that have had, flooding issues in their basements. They can plant a lot of trees. They can slow down erosion. Electricity, air quality, natural gas, they're cooling in the summer. They cut the wind in the winter. So, helps your bills there. So the average tree, this is just an average tree, average benefits. So maybe a 15-inch tree gives $150 worth of benefits. So, people don't know that they're getting paid to have their trees until they're gone. So sometimes even if it's $75 a year to keep a tree alive, you're making money by having it. And we have our program, Saving America's Iconic Trees. We like to remind everybody about if you're in your hometown or of a really iconic or historic tree in your neighborhood, we do adopt those from time to time. You can submit them to our website, and we'll take care of the product. If you want to donate the labor, we'll get together on it and save some more of these iconic trees. Thank you.